Yo, 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 yo. It's your boy, Mark K. Smith. Welcome back. Welcome back. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Once again, it's your boy, Mark K. Smith. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We just had a matchup between Indiana Fever and the Las Vegas Aces, and it was a grind out game. It gave playoff atmosphere, it gave toughness, it gave defensive mentality, it gave physical, a lot of aggression. And what we saw for the Las Vegas Aces is a team that's been there before. We saw a team that can get physical, that can play different styles of basketball. We saw a team that didn't need all of their best players to have a great game in order to win. And you look at the Indiana Fever and you look at their greatness and how efficient they have been coming outside of the All-Star break and outside of the Olympic break. They've been phenomenal. And bad games are going to happen, but you don't want your bad games happening when you have a opportunity to make a statement. And I know they're going to be back playing against the Las Vegas Aces on Friday, but Caitlin and the Indiana Fever, they struggle a little bit. And this is kind of expected when we talk about for young teams, especially teams that have never reached the playoffs before. This is going to be their first year reaching the playoffs. This is going to be the first year the Indiana Fever has reached the playoffs since 2016. And there's going to be growing pains. And if you have the opportunities in the regular season to experience some of those growing pains, that's what you kind of want. And I'm looking at the Indiana Fever and I'm looking at the Las Vegas Aces. And who knows, this could potentially be a playoff matchup. But as I was watching the Indiana Fever, I was watching Caitlin Clark, and I was watching Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston, when they are on, they can beat any team in the WNBA. That's just a fact. When they're on, they can compete and they can beat any team in the WNBA. But a lot of times when 2 out of the 3 are on, they're still competitive. They still have a chance. But when 1 out of 3 are on, they're going to struggle. And tonight we saw that with the Indiana Fever, with Kelsey Mitchell being the only really positive from this game and the only player that really stepped up and was able to showcase her talent and her ability and kind of keep the Fever at bay in trying to mount a comeback against the Las Vegas Aces. But it's tough. We saw a team in the Las Vegas Aces that's just been there before, and they're watching the game. It seemed like just from size, athleticism, and strength wise, watching the game, the WNBA game versus Los Angeles Aces versus Indiana Fever, it just seems like it was varsity versus junior varsity for their size, for its athleticism, for their strength. It was clear as day that the Los Angeles Aces have a more physical team. They have a more athletic team. They have a team that has a lot more size. And if you watch their type of play style, they play very aggressive. They play attacking the basket, going downhill. That is their game plan. A lot of ball movement, also kicking the ball out to the second level in the basketball court for Ajawilson. And the rotations for the Indiana Fever weren't really strong. And we know defense is something that they have been better at since they came off the break, but it's still something that they have to work on going forward, especially when we talk about rotations for us in the pick and roll and them kind of just missing rotations and staying too long for helping on Ajawilson. And I understand that because Ajawilson is their best player and the best player in the world for in the WNBA landscape. But it was just too many times that the Indiana Fever were just too glued on Ajawilson and forgetting about everybody else. And then that's allowed a lot of cutting to go on for the Las Vegas Aces. And we know the Indiana Fever, they want to play the pace and space game. But unfortunately, they played into the hands of the Aces, and they did everything the Aces want to do. The Aces kind of slowed the game down, made it a grind-out game, made it rough, made it physical, made the Indiana Fever have to play in a half court and not really get out on the open transition. And we know when the Indiana Fever get out on the open break and open transitions, they are one of the best teams in the WNBA, and they can really beat you like that. That is their strength. playing on the fast break, pace and space, 7 seconds or less offense, hitting Caitlin throwing dime passes from one end of the court to the other end of the court. But they weren't allowed to do that this game. And for the most part, they really played the Aces game, and they did a good job of coming back in the second half. But the slow starts for the Indiana Fever, they're going to have to figure that out, because you can't have slow starts in the playoffs. You can't have slow starts against great teams, because if you have a slow start against great teams, a lot of times they're not going to really give up the lead or let you really come back. You may get into, and when you have a team that's a championship experienced team, a team that's been there before, a great team, a title contender, a lot of times when they get up 15, 17 points, you'll probably come back and you're going to go on a run, because basketball is a game of runs, but you're going to struggle to overcome that run, because great teams are also going to go on a run. They're also going to go on a 6 to 8, 10-point run eventually, even when you try to cut it back to 6 or cut it back 8 to 6 points. And what happens is you're playing catch up, and it's hard to catch up when we talk about momentum. And basketball is a game of momentum and also a game of runs. But when you're playing great teams, getting down by 15 points early on and then trying to play catch up, and then you're kind of like, it's like a back and forth. You get it to 6, and they get it back up by 10, and by 12, you get it to 6, and they get it back to up by 8. It's so hard, especially when you're playing a team that's better than you, a team that has more talent, and a team that just has more depth. And especially when you're allowing them to play their brand and style of basketball, it's very tough. Once again, the Aces were very physical, very aggressive. They go downhill. They were playing inside out, and we know that the Indiana Fever like to play outside in. So they were playing inside out. If you're the Aces, they were attacking the basket, going downhill, drawing fouls, and having the defense suck in and then passing the ball. And that's why you were able to see Alyssa Clark hit those open shots and Tiffany Hayes coming downhill. When we talk about depth, when we talk about having players to come off the bench, the Aces have that. They have players that they can lean on and not have to have good games from Kelsey Plum, not have to have games from Jackie Young, not have to have good games from Chelsea Gray. They have players on their bench that can come in and be impactful, because they're a deep, deep team. And that's what the Indiana Fever don't have. And it's just as crazy to me that a lot of times when we look at the Indiana Fever, they're big, they're starting 5, lock them in, they're good, they can compete against any team on a nightly basis. But the problem is, just when people want to start to get Christy Sides in the media, start to give her some recognition and start to give her some, like, not going to say clout, but really just give her some, when the media started to give Christy Styles some recognition, she said, hold my beer. She said, watch this. Because the first half of coaching display from her was horrific. No disrespect to these players, but Christy Wiles and Katie Lloyd, they ain't played since before the Olympics. Like, they were playing and in a rotation when the Indiana Fever were like 1-8 and started off the season 1-8 and trying to climb back to make it to 500. They don't need to be playing. In certain matchups, you don't put in these certain players that haven't played in a long time or getting very low minutes and try to incorporate them in the rotation in a marquee matchup against this team. You do that when you're playing the Mystics. You do that when you're playing the Sparks. You do that when you're playing the Atlanta Dream. You don't do that when you're playing a title contender. So her first half coaching display was horrific, and it was horrible, and it really was the reason why the Indiana Fever got down, because she was taking out her best players and incorporating players that haven't played since basically haven't played since when the Indiana Fever got in good. So it's just like those women haven't been playing, and the Indiana Fever have been thriving. Like, it just didn't make sense. And it was just like watching that in the first half, I'm like, Christy Sides, what the hell are you doing? And I'm not a type of person that blames coaches. I was a former player, so I know how important coaches are. I know how impactful they can be, but sometimes coaches do make mistakes just like players make mistakes. But playing Katie Lloyd and Christy Wallace, what the hell are we doing in the first half? And that really like killed any of the momentum and any of the vibe that the Indiana Fever had, because they had already gotten down, and you're playing these players that really just didn't look like they were ready to be out there. Like the moment was too big for them. And then on top of that, you allow your other basketball players like Kelsey Mitchell, even though she had a phenomenal game, but you didn't allow them to get a rhythm early on for this game. And then we look at Caitlin Clark and we look at the Indiana Fever. I always talk about the Indiana Fever. They are great when they're playing their type of game, pace and space, pushing the ball in transition, and really dominating, and their threes are falling, their jump shots are falling. They are a jump shot shooting team, but the only problem with a jump shot shooting team is before a team like the Golden State Warriors won a title shooting jumpers, they were the first of their kind. The same thing that goes on in the WNBA. It's going to be hard to win the championships with a team that solely relies on this type of play style for shooting jumpers first. And the great thing about the Indiana Fever is they have players that can do that, and they have the best generator in my eyes in WNBA history already in Caitlin Clark, where she can score and also she can generate and make plays for others with her passing ability. And then they have Kelsey Mitchell as well. Hopefully they re-sign her in the offseason. But at the same time, relying on your jump shots and that's the style of play that they're going to play 7 seconds or less offense. I'm all here for it because they're exciting, they're electric, and I believe if they keep their core together, they can win a championship in the next 4 years, easy. But the problem is when those jump shots aren't falling, what you going to do about it? And the crazy thing about it is they can play this play style, pace and space, 7 seconds or less offense, and if their shots aren't falling, they have a big man to go to. But so many times, like I've been saying in the regular season, they have to incorporate Aaliyah Boston in the half court and allow her sometimes to get her game going first, especially when things are a grind out, slow game and they're playing the opposing team's play style. You have a big man in Boston that you can run your offense through in the pick and roll, in the low post, in the low block, and she's very skilled and she's very talented around the basket, And also she's one of the best passing bigs, if not the best passing big as a center in the league right now for the WNBA. Like she understands, has a very high IQ and understands like reads and give and goes and fake give and goes. Like she is exceptional. Like, and she's super young, but you have to start preparing yourselves to, if our play style, if our type of offense really gets obliterated, we still have something to go to and we still have something to lean on. And we know how to run and play a different style, a brand of basketball, even if it's not the style brand of basketball that we want. You have that with Aaliyah Boston. You have to start going to her, and especially in the games where it's a half-court game or a grind-out game, a physical game. You have a post player where you can throw the ball down to and let her get busy or run sets for her to get easy and open looks. She's very talented. She's very skilled. That's what Chrissy Size has to figure out. That's what Caitlin Clark has to also figure out, and because she's controlling and dictating pace, and we know she loves to play fast, but sometimes playing fast and playing in that high octile offense in that super accelerated pace is not always best for half court in the playoffs when the defense is making you play their game, or when the refs are calling the game very, it's very tight and allowing contact, allowing the opposing teams to be aggressive, they're allowing teams to really get after it for it's a physical makeup and having a physical matchup in game like it was today. So you got to understand how to play different styles. And that's something that Indiana Fever got to figure out soon because the playoffs are approaching. They're not going to always be able to play their style and brand of basketball. So, and I understand that the Indiana Fever, they want to play and get it out on a break, and that's very important. But it's been a few games where I've noticed that they sometimes get shell shocked when they can't play their brand of basketball. But that's a lot has to do with coaching. That also has a lot to do with the youth, and that also has a lot to do with them understanding that you have to run sets in the half court, sometimes inside, outside, playing the game of basketball like the Las Vegas Aces did, instead of always outside in, which is kind of like the modern game of basketball today, where we're seeing teams on the fast break transitions on a 2-on-1 fast break or 3-on-2 fast break. They're shooting out to the 3-point lines. They're passing for a hit open three instead of trying to get a layup. That's modernized basketball. That's analytics, threes and layups as well. But in a game in the WNBA where things are still more play style based and we still have more traditional roles and positions in the league, it's very important for you to understand and utilize those positions where you have the advantage or you have the type of play style or a player that has a type of traditional play style that can go out and dominate, especially in the half court like they do for Leo Boston. Sides lost the game by subbing and messing up the rhythm. Yup. Sides lost the game by subbing. Yup. Secondary bench players. It was insane. It was insane. Katie Lloyd, like I didn't know. I couldn't remember the last time I watched a game, an Indiana Fever game, and watched her play. I didn't even know who. I'm not even gonna joke it. Like Christy Wiles, she ain't played since the first half of the season. I was looking on the bench. I was like, damn, who on the court? I'm like, damn, who's that? Like it was embarrassing. Refs gave so many fouls to Fever players compared to Aces. They were pounding Fever players with no calls, and that's when I talk about the physical aspect. You're not gonna always get calls. And that's when I talked about how the Las Vegas Aces, they look like a varsity team, and the Indiana Fever look like a JV team going up against each other because they were just, the Aces are more physical, stronger, more athletic, more length, and they play more aggressive and they have that more dog mentality. They're all about that grit and grind. So when they are getting up on you and pressuring you and using their shoulder, using their hands and bumping you and hitting you off of screens and grabbing your arm and stuff like that, that's kind of playoff basketball. And that's something that the Indiana Fever, because there's a lot of calls they could have gone their way, but you're not going to get always those calls, and you were at home. So it's just kind of like you had the advantage as well for it's like the fan bases, for the fan base, for it's also like a lot of times things tend to go your way when you have home court advantage. So it's not like I can really say that the Indiana Fever didn't get a lot of calls. It was just that in the beginning of the game, wherein the Las Vegas Aces went on a run and kind of set the momentum and set the tempo of the game to be more aggressive, to be more physical, that benefited them going forward throughout the game. AJ had a bad game. I wasn't impressed. CJ had a bad game too, but I think they lost the confidence when they started subbing. That could have been the case. I mean, Ajawilson just became the WNBA's all-time leader in season scorer. She just beat Jewel Lloyd's record from the previous season. She did it in less games. Ajawilson is going to be the unanimous MVP and also Defensive Player of the Year. Even though she didn't shoot the ball really great, to be honest, Ajawilson beat the Indiana Fever by herself, offensively and defensively. Because it wasn't a complete game where we saw from Aja, Gray, Kelsey, Jackie. It was really just Wilson dominating on both sides of the basketball and her presence. And even though the Las Vegas Aces kind of went away from her in the fourth quarter, when it was time for them to get a bucket, when it was time for them to stop some of the Indiana Fever's momentum, they went to Ajawilson and she got a bucket and she was able to hit those timely buckets and key shots in the biggest moments. And that's what separate the Los Angeles Aces from the Indiana Fever from when they were trying to make it close. And that's also that's separating Ajawilson from a lot of the other players that people try to put on her level, because at the end of the day, Ajawilson is one-on-one, and when it's time and it's money time, they give her the ball, she goes to work and she dominates. So no, I disagree. Dirty basketball has no place in the pros or any time. I don't think it was dirty basketball. I just think it's about teams being aggressive and being physical. Like, it's part of the game. Sides seem to be purposely sabotaging her own players. No joke. No coaches. This is incompetent. We see her doing the same thing. No one is going to accept their rhythm. It was idiotic watching that first half of basketball with Coach Sides. It was sad. It was really like taking her players in and out. She tried to make a 10, 11-man rotation. We're getting close to the playoffs. What the hell are you trying to make a 10 to 11-man rotation? Rotation needs to be cut. Your top 7 players need to play the bulk of the minutes in the bulk of the game. You're gearing up for the playoffs. Only thing you need to be experimenting is when you're in a situation where, or in practice, where you're trying to develop more offensive rhythm when things aren't going your way, and you're trying to develop in running an offense not just through Caitlin-Clark and letting her be in the generator, but run the offense through Aaliyah Boston at times in the half-court game. That's the only thing they need to be trying to do. But you do that once again against teams that are horrible and teams that aren't going to the playoffs, not against championship caliber teams. You do that against the Mystics, the Dream, the Sparks, teams of that nature, the Dallas, like teams that are fighting for playoff positioning and trying to make it just into the playoffs. You don't do that against the best team in the league, or one of the best teams in the leagues. I'm sorry. That doesn't make sense. You play the best players and you try to control the game, playing your play style and not allowing the team to play their play style, and then not allowing your best players to not get in a rhythm because you're taking them out and summing them in with players that haven't been playing since before the Olympic break. It made no sense. So it's frustrating. I don't understand. I don't understand people are frustrated with certain things that went on this game, but coaching is a part of basketball, and it's so crazy because sometimes I feel that the Fever are destined to go on a deep run in the playoffs, but sometimes I feel like the Fever are also has a possibility to get swept. And it just depends on the matchup that they're going to play in the playoffs, but also depends on the coaching. It also depends on just their young team. There's a lot of growing pains, and they got to figure things out quickly. And your coach is very questionable up and down at times, and sometimes that can be a detriment going forward in the playoffs. But they've been on a hell of a run. So, and Caitlin-Clark played terrible. Like, we can praise Caitlin-Clark when she plays well. We can talk about how she's a top 7 player in the league. We can talk about her greatness and all those things. But the truth of the matter, she played terrible this game. This was her worst shooting performance in the entire regular season. She shot 6 for 22 and 1 for 10 from the 3-point line, and she was turning the ball over a lot. And she wasn't really, making a lot of key plays for her passing ability. She looked a little out of rhythm, out of touch a little bit this game. I don't know if it was due to the physical size and aggression and the perimeter defense that the Aces were kind of, bringing it to her, or she just could have just had a bad game, and it happened. She's been lights out, on fire. Sometimes bad games happens, but she did have a bad game, and it was her worst game of the regular season. And you hate to have those type of games, especially when you're playing against big time championship caliber teams, and it was on NBA TV and everybody's watching. And this is when people are talking about, well, she deserves to be on the first team all WNBA team, which I still solely believe she does. But these games matter. Marquee games matter. And to have a coach that sits up and kind of ruins your rhythm in the first half and trying to create some, I don't know what crazy ass lineups or whatever the hell she was doing, that is very frustrating as well. You saw Caitlin-Clark, she was very frustrating. And even Kelsey Mitchell was very frustrating in the first half. But this game definitely solidified Ajawilson going to be the MVP, her becoming the all-time, single season scoring leader. She's going to be the first woman in WNBA history to have 1,000 points in a regular season. that's going to happen as well. So it was a great game, but things happen, man. But how can you have confidence your coach is nuts? Mitchell still showed up. Yeah, David Mitchell did show up. But because I say this all the time, Mitchell is their closer. Kelsey Mitchell is their closer. She is going to have to close out games for them because she's a pure hooper. She's a bucket. She's always about getting her shot. And no matter if she misses 7 in a row, she's going to shoot that 8th shot and believes it has the confidence of it going in. And when it's time to hit those key jump shots and key moments and to go out into when things are looking bleak, she's a player that can get you the ball, you get the ball to, and let them go to work and operate because her game is wired on scoring first, wired on getting buckets first, wired on hitting key shots first, wired on getting to her spots first. Like, it's a mindset thing. Caitlin Clark, as great as she is, she's a killer. She's a hooper. She's a generator. Caitlin Clark's is more wired, like, to see everything that's going on and make the right reads and make the right passes. And sometimes I wish Caitlin Clark would kind of get out of that and get back to, like, I'm not going to say her Iowa days, but I want her to be more scorer first, passing second, even though she's a generator. So the two go hand in hand. But at the same time, it comes a point where Caitlin Clark has to look to score first and not just pass. And maybe that happens with, like, and one thing I will say about Caitlin Clark, over the course of her career, people have said that, like, trusting teammates has always been one of her problems, one of her issues. And we've seen her gain a lot of trust with the Indiana Fever and her teammates. And this is the best group of players she's ever played with. So credit to her. But at the same time, I want the best player on the best team taking the most shots and being comfortable with scoring first and then passing second, because you're only as good as your best player being in rhythm and having that confidence. And they're going to need that. They're going to need that come playoff time. But it's your boy, Mark Smith. Make sure you go like, comment, subscribe. If you're new to this channel, I really appreciate you. And also, if you got a niece, you got a brother, you got a sister, you know, a nephew, you got a kid, a grandkid, whatever the case may be, if you want to go out and support, I released my second children's book. It's called Becoming Kobe Bryant. It's out on Barnes & Noble. Please go cop it. Please go support. Tell a friend to tell a friend. It is my second children's book. Once again, this is the hardcover copy. It's on Barnes & Noble. I would appreciate any word of mouth, any support. And once again, man, we'll be back on Friday. It's your boy, Mark Smith. I'm gone, man. Peace.